Two names, two eras, two completely different fighting philosophies. On one side, Bruce Lee, the man who changed martial arts forever. On the other, Conor McGregor, one of the most dangerous and successful combat athletes of the modern era. But what if these two men somehow met in their absolute prime? Would Bruce Lee's legendary speed be enough? Could Conor's real-world fighting experience overwhelm a martial arts icon? And most importantly, have people been judging this matchup completely wrong all these years? Today, we're breaking down every major category: size, speed, power, fight IQ, and real combat experience to discover who would actually have the advantage. Because the answer isn't nearly as obvious as most people think. Before we talk about speed or fighting skill, there's one category most people completely overlook, and it could change the entire outcome of this matchup. Let's start with something measurable: physical attributes. Because no matter how skilled a fighter is, size and athleticism always matter. Bruce Lee was incredibly lean, explosive, and remarkably strong for his weight. During much of his prime, he weighed around 135 to 145 pounds while maintaining extremely low body fat. His body was built for speed. Every movement was efficient. Every ounce of unnecessary weight was eliminated. Even today, many athletes would be impressed by his conditioning. But then we look at Conor McGregor. At his peak, Conor competed across multiple weight classes and regularly carried significantly more muscle mass than Bruce Lee. He was larger, stronger, and possessed a longer reach. That reach advantage becomes important because it allows a fighter to land strikes from safer distances. In a hypothetical matchup, Bruce would likely need to close distance much more aggressively. Conor, meanwhile, could potentially control range using his length and timing. However, raw size can sometimes be misleading. History is full of examples where smaller fighters defeated larger opponents through superior speed and precision. And that's exactly why our next category may completely change the conversation. Because when it comes to pure speed, Bruce Lee enters territory that almost sounds unbelievable. This is where the debate starts to get serious. Because if there's one category that built Bruce Lee's legend, it's speed. But was he actually faster than an elite modern fighter? When most people think about Bruce Lee, they think about one thing: speed. Not strength, not size. Speed. Training partners often described his movements as shockingly fast. Stories about his one-inch punch and lightning-quick hand combinations became part of martial arts history. Of course, over the years, some of those stories have likely been exaggerated. But even the most skeptical observers agree on one thing: Bruce Lee was exceptionally fast. His movements were efficient, direct, explosive. He didn't waste energy. Every strike traveled the shortest possible path to its target. And that's a major reason why he looked so different from many martial artists of his era. But here's where modern fans often make a mistake. They assume Conor McGregor isn't fast. In reality, speed was one of Conor's greatest weapons. Watch his best performances and you'll notice something incredible. His opponents often couldn't react in time. Not because they were slow, because Conor's timing was elite. His ability to recognize openings and launch counters in a fraction of a second helped him become one of the most dangerous strikers in modern combat sports. So who has the advantage? In pure hand speed? Bruce Lee may very well have the edge. His training methods were specifically designed to maximize reaction speed and explosive movement. But fighting speed is more than moving your hands quickly. It's decision-making, timing, distance management, reading your opponent under pressure. And in those areas, Conor's years of elite competition become extremely important. Because speed in a gym and speed in a real fight aren't always the same thing. And that brings us to a category where the difference becomes impossible to ignore: power. And the numbers there may surprise you. And if you think speed decides this fight, wait until you see the next category. Because one man may have been faster, but the other hit like a truck. Now we arrive at one of the most controversial parts of this entire debate: power, because this is where emotion often clashes with reality. Many Bruce Lee fans point to stories about his incredible strength, the famous one-inch punch, training demonstrations, accounts from students who described his explosive force. And to be fair, Bruce Lee was extraordinarily powerful for his size. His training combined speed, technique, balance, timing, and body mechanics in a way that allowed him to generate surprising force. What made Bruce dangerous wasn't simply muscle, it was efficiency. He understood how to transfer energy through his entire body with almost no wasted movement. And that's exactly why people are still talking about his demonstrations decades later. But then we have to look at Conor McGregor. Unlike demonstrations or training stories, Conor's power was tested against elite professional fighters under real competitive conditions, again and again and again. Throughout his career, he produced knockouts that changed fights in seconds. His left hand became one of the most feared weapons in combat sports. Opponents knew it was coming. They trained specifically to defend against it. And many still couldn't stop it. That's an important distinction. Bruce Lee showed remarkable power. Conor repeatedly proved his power against world-class opposition. When we talk about raw striking force, body mass matters, weight matters, reach matters, years of professional striking experience matter. And in those categories, Conor holds significant advantages. Does that mean Bruce couldn't hurt him? Absolutely not. A fighter with Bruce Lee's speed and precision could create dangerous openings against almost anyone. But if we're judging pure knockout power, it's difficult to ignore the evidence. This category most likely belongs to Conor McGregor. However, the fight still isn't over, because many experts would argue that neither speed nor power is the most important factor in combat. The next category might actually decide everything. Fight IQ. And this is where things become incredibly interesting. Now we arrive at one of the most controversial parts of this entire debate. Power. Because this is where emotion often clashes with reality. Many Bruce Lee fans point to stories about his incredible strength. The famous one-inch punch, training demonstrations, accounts from students who described his explosive force. And to be fair, Bruce Lee was extraordinarily powerful for his size. His training combined speed, technique, balance, timing, and body mechanics in a way that allowed him to generate surprising force. What made Bruce dangerous wasn't simply muscle, it was efficiency. He understood how to transfer energy through his entire body with almost no wasted movement. And that's exactly why people are still talking about his demonstrations decades later. But then we have to look at Conor McGregor. Unlike demonstrations or training stories, Conor's power was tested against elite professional fighters under real competitive conditions. Again, and again, and again. Throughout his career, he produced knockouts that changed fights in seconds. His left hand became one of the most feared weapons in combat sports. Opponents knew it was coming. They trained specifically to defend against it. And many still couldn't stop it. That's an important distinction. Bruce Lee showed remarkable power. Conor repeatedly proved his power against world-class opposition. When we talk about raw striking force, body mass matters, weight matters, reach matters, years of professional striking experience matter. And in those categories, Conor holds significant advantages. Does that mean Bruce couldn't hurt him? Absolutely not. A fighter with Bruce Lee's speed and precision could create dangerous openings against almost anyone. But if we're judging pure knockout power, it's difficult to ignore the evidence. This category most likely belongs to Conor McGregor. However, the fight still isn't over, because many experts would argue that neither speed nor power is the most important factor in combat. The next category might actually decide everything: fight IQ, and this is where things become incredibly interesting. So far, Conor has a strong argument in power. Bruce has a strong argument in speed. But what happens when we move beyond physical attributes and start talking about the human mind? Because the smartest fighter often wins long before the fight even begins. This is where the conversation becomes far more complicated. Because intelligence inside a fight is something you can't easily measure. There are no simple statistics, no speed tests, no strength machines. Yet it may be the most important category of them all. Let's start with Bruce Lee. One reason Bruce became such an influential figure wasn't just his physical ability, it was the way he thought. Decades before modern mixed martial arts became popular, Bruce questioned traditional martial arts systems. He believed fighters should take what works, discard what doesn't, and constantly adapt. At the time, that idea was revolutionary. Many people saw martial arts as fixed systems. Bruce saw combat as a constantly evolving process. He studied boxing, fencing, wrestling concepts, footwork, distance management, timing, reaction psychology. In many ways, his mindset predicted the future of combat sports. But then we have Conor McGregor. And unlike most fighters, Conor wasn't just physically gifted. He was a strategist. At his peak, he built entire game plans around understanding opponents' habits. He studied reactions, patterns, defensive tendencies, movement preferences. Sometimes it looked as though he knew what opponents were about to do before they did it themselves. That's not just skill, that's fight IQ. The crucial difference, however, is experience. Bruce Lee spent years studying combat and developing ideas that transformed martial arts forever. But Conor spent years testing his ideas against elite professional fighters under intense pressure. World title fights, hostile crowds, championship rounds, real consequences. That experience teaches lessons that simply can't be replicated in a training environment. Every mistake gets punished. Every weakness gets exposed. Every adjustment matters. If we're talking purely about innovation and martial arts philosophy, Bruce Lee might have the advantage. If we're talking about applying high-level decision-making against elite competition, Conor's resume becomes incredibly difficult to ignore. And that's why this matchup remains so fascinating. Because both men were brilliant, just in very different ways. Now we've reached the moment everyone has been waiting for. The actual fight. Not theory, not individual categories. A complete fight simulation. And the outcome may surprise you. We've compared the speed. We've compared the power. We've compared the intelligence. Now let's put everything together and answer the question that brought millions of people into this debate in the first place. What actually happens if they fight? Imagine the fight is about to begin. No crowd bias, no internet debates, no nostalgia, no hype, just two extraordinary fighters standing across from each other. The opening seconds would likely be cautious. Both men were known for reading opponents before fully committing to an attack. Bruce Lee would almost certainly try to use movement, angles, and speed to create opportunities. His objective would be simple: avoid prolonged exchanges. Stay mobile, enter quickly, strike. Then exit before a counter could arrive. Conor, meanwhile, would likely focus on range control. He would use his reach advantage, footwork, and timing to keep Bruce at a distance where he could safely attack. And that's where the battle becomes fascinating. Bruce's greatest advantage is speed. Conor's greatest advantage is experience against elite resistance. As the fight progresses, both men would begin gathering information. Patterns, reactions, habits, tiny details that often determine who wins high-level fights. The question is whether Bruce could consistently enter striking range without absorbing significant damage. Against most opponents, his speed might make that possible. Against an elite modern fighter with years of professional experience, the challenge becomes far greater. The longer the fight lasts, the more the advantage may begin shifting toward Conor. Not because Bruce lacks skill, but because professional competition creates a level of adaptation that's difficult to replicate elsewhere. Round after round, Conor has demonstrated an ability to solve problems under pressure. However, counting Bruce Lee out would be a mistake. A massive mistake. His unpredictability, creativity, and explosive movement could create moments that even highly experienced fighters would struggle to anticipate. And that's exactly why this debate has survived for decades. Neither man is an easy answer. Neither man can simply be dismissed. But eventually, every comparison has to reach a conclusion. And after examining all the evidence, one outcome appears more likely than the others. So after everything we've analyzed, who actually wins? The answer depends on the question you're asking. If we're discussing influence, innovation, and impact on martial arts history, Bruce Lee stands in a category almost entirely by himself. His ideas helped reshape how fighters think, how they train, how they adapt. His legacy extends far beyond wins and losses. But if we're evaluating a hypothetical fight under modern competitive conditions, the evidence points in a different direction. Conor McGregor's advantages in size, reach, power, and elite-level competitive experience are difficult to ignore. That doesn't mean the fight would be easy. Far from it. Bruce Lee's speed, creativity, and unpredictability would present challenges that very few fighters would enjoy facing. There would almost certainly be dangerous moments, unexpected moments, perhaps even moments where Bruce appears to take control. But over time, the combination of physical advantages and professional fight experience would likely begin to matter more and more. And that's why the most realistic conclusion is this: Bruce Lee may have changed martial arts forever, but Conor McGregor would probably have the advantage in a modern professional fight. Of course, that's just one perspective. And now it's your turn. Who do you think wins? Bruce Lee or Conor McGregor? Let me know in the comments below, because this debate isn't ending anytime soon.